Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I am your host Maria Legier, still hungover from New Year's Eve. Drinking at my age is not a good idea. This is why I am an anti-feminist, part 13. One of the things that most confound me in this everlasting current year of confusing culture wars and social justice nonsense is this willingness from women in general, whether feminist or not, to be considered victims and to consider themselves as victims. Whatever can be held forth as an example of victimhood will be grabbed, smeared in their faces like blood and war paint, then held forth as a supreme example of the perpetually victimized woman. The best example of this, I believe, is the wage gap. The feminist lie about this has been debunked over and over again. Time and time again. Again and again and again. And still it is being used to justify their infantile victimhood complex, used as proof of overt discrimination, used as an example of why feminism is still ever so sorely needed in this age of the mighty hysteria. The truth is out there for everyone to see. The wage gap, as feminism prefers to present it, is long since debunked, and then it is debunked again, and a third time, just for good measure. It is, in fact, an earnings gap. Meaning, men work more than women, men take on more overtime, men are better negotiators than women, men take less sick leave, men work more dangerous jobs, and so forth and so on. There's also this pesky little factoid to contend with. It is illegal to pay someone less or more depending on their sex. Illegal. Which makes me wonder where all the lawsuits are. Where are all the companies going bankrupt from having to pay legal fees, being sued into oblivion, being assaulted day and night by police forces, besieged by law and order from clearly breaking the law? Not that this matters much, of course. For lately I have seen the feminist hordes move the goalposts ever so slightly, and apparently unseen and unnoticed, cloaked by the night's veiled satin madness. This time around, being unable to still keep the wage gap lie going as they used to, they claim it instead to be proof that typical female professions are considered of less worth than typical male professions, further keeping the wage gap myth going, despite it being debunked. And no evidence needed, of course. Believe women, even when they make no sense and present no evidence but their own assumed assertions. For women have got to be victims. Otherwise, what is the bloody point of feminism? The feminist hive mind are well aware that the pay gap is false. They just don't give a fuck. Or they choose not to believe it, as victimhood just tastes so damned sweet in their mouths and scatterbrained infantilism. A feminist will roar in your face, spittle and drool flying everywhere, that did you know that women are paid less than men? And no, this has nothing to do with the aforementioned reasons. We are discriminated against, I promise. Fuckface. Reason. This is feminism. Followed by a kick to the chest to send one plummeting down the morally decayed and emotionally bankrupt bottomless pit of dread feminist despair, victimizing and infantilizing the poor whammons 1 second of free fall at a time. This I cannot grasp. They are well aware of the debunking. They just don't care. They want to be discriminated against. They want to be victims. So strong, so tough, so resilient. Nevertheless she persisted, and all other pathetic platitudes and select sentences that say little, but sure as hell help in boosting some frail and frantic feminist egos. It sure must feel good to be constantly validated and celebrated, no matter what you do, or don't do, even when just doing things you're supposed to do, or not supposed to do. When this so-called discrimination has been disproved and debunked, one should believe that the feminist platoons would be well pleased with themselves. That they would pat themselves on their chubby back fat in self-congratulatory, self-celebratory glee, as is of course their greatest talent, and be pleased with this lack of discrimination. It is, however, the other way around. They celebrate perceived discrimination, not lack of discrimination, for their core reason for existing is to perpetuate feminism. If discrimination is disproven, they weep and carry on as though the discrimination is there. Cannot let pesky facts get in the way of the narrative. If the narrative is disrupted, they have no reason to exist. If they have no reason to exist, they cannot carry on. Then they would have to actually cultivate a personality instead of merely being a feminist. That would be a difficult task indeed, for someone whose main goal, focus, career, belief and reason for fucking living, existing, breathing and feeling has been centered around the spiraling drain of feminism all their livelong life. It is a dangerous thing to make an ideology such a big part of one's identity that one is adrift in the void without it. They want to be victims. They want to be seen as both weak and helpless, in need of provision and protection, and as strong and independent. A woman needs a man as a fish needs a bicycle, after all. And a strong independent fish cannot be expected to live long on land. They need to live in water. Take a fish out of water and it will die. Take a feminist out of feminism, that is to say victimhood, and she will die. Though it is true that they don't need a man. They need government intervention instead of a man. Implement this law and that law and all those other laws for positive discrimination. You know, actual written in law for all the world to see discrimination. Blanket discrimination that favors one sex over the other sex. Then pretend and feign discrimination over this and that and all the other thises and that's. Roaring and screaming, snarling and gnarling and snivelling and weeping that they are ever so discriminated against for being women, despite all these laws in their favor and their favor only. So please, Daddy, give us some more. For they are the meekest and the most oppressed and the strongest and the most independent, all rolled into one neat sausage roll. In the wind-blown wastes of Norway, we have a law of equality. The wording of the law says that it favors women and minorities. An odd phrasing for a law supposedly in place to guarantee equal treatment, as it clearly favors women and minorities, quite contrary to equality. It was proposed that the wording of the law should be altered so as to actually be equal, you know, gender neutral. The feminist hive mind protested, and so the law remains. Gendered discrimination written into the law of equality that is there to work against gender discrimination, favoring the sex that is, for some reason, considered the oppressed and helpless sex. And so the law of equality is held forth as proof that women are oppressed. Otherwise we would not need that law to be gender specific, now would we? Checkmate, misogynists. It is a strange patriarchy to live in which women are so favoured that they have special protection under law, in which their voices are heard so clear and taken so seriously that a law that is there to guarantee their privilege remain as is. Odd as well, considering the feminists screech that everything must be gender neutral. Except that which favour women, of course, which is peculiar and odd in a society in which women are eternally oppressed and downtrodden, where men are eternally privileged and protected. It is incredibly strange to me. Of course, the feminist hive mind will screech and jabber that men don't need those laws, for they are written in the very foundations of our society and our culture, unseen, but still there, despite all evidence to the contrary. When boys and men suffer disadvantages, we don't need to care about that, because girls and women suffer more. Why else would there be laws in place especially for girls and women and none for men if girls and women did not suffer more? Checkmate once again, foul misogynist. Truly, we live in a society. We exist within a world in which we have been told that all men everywhere oppress women, in which all men everywhere benefit from the oppression of women. Now, I have had more than enough feminists scream in my face, either through the internet or in real life, to really and truly wonder how, if I were so terrible and oppressor, these women would dare scream in my face as they do. Surely, if women are so scared of men as feminism claims, no woman would dare behave in that manner when facing the terrible and terrifying enemy of their mythology and legend. When a feminist woman feels so emboldened as to personally attack me for me doing nothing but give my wife a compliment on her appearance, or chew me out for daring to be born on the 8th of March and so celebrate my birthday on the International Day of the Master Sex, or for referring to my girlfriend at the time as my girlfriend instead of using her name, I have to wonder how real that oppression is, and how deep the victimhood goes. I cannot be the only one who consider it weird that women are so terrified of men, and still feel so safe and fancy-free in our proximity that they attempt to control our speech, our behaviour, and how we should not celebrate our birthday when it happens to fall on the same day as the International Day of the Aryan Sex. Because celebrating my birthday on the day of my birth distracts from the celebration of women when those 2 days just so happen to be the same. Because of course it does. Alas, for women, there is currency in victimhood, because people in power will listen to women in distress, as will everyone else for that matter. There is a need, deeply rooted within all of humanity, to protect women. Now, this protection will be different depending on culture and time and place and whatever. It is still there, however. Women are to be sheltered and saved from this and from that, from tit and from tat and from ass and legs. Biologically, women are more important than men, and men are not as important as women. Women and children first, and to hell with the men. And the boys. On the Titanic, boys over the age of 8 was considered to be men, and so potentially left behind to die. Dr. Charles Pellegrino, Her Name Titanic, McGraw-Hill's publishing company, 1988. So that adult women should survive. How terribly oppressed, how very much treated like chattel when their right to live is greater than that of 8-year-old boys. I would consider being allowed to live where others are expected to die. In fact, to sacrifice their lives for me, a severe privilege. But what the hell do I know? Here I sit close to weeping after reading an account of a 10-year-old boy left behind on the Titanic to die, basking in the glow of his eternal male privilege and all the accumulated wealth of his lifetime of oppression. All 10 years of it. Patriarchy hurts men too, because of course it bloody does. Everything must be blamed on men. I see precious few feminists complaining about women and children first, and other very clear female privileges. Unless they are able to paint that as women being victimized, of course. Which they will. Though they will still be reluctant to change it. One cannot take anything away from women, you know. You can only give to women, of course, and as expected. Particularly so when that which is given is taken from men. For men deserve nothing, but to give. I may sound hyperbolic, but I struggle to see anything but that in situations where men and young boys are expected to give their lives so that women shall survive. That is an extreme example, of course, and I will freely admit to that. It still holds true, however. We must have so and such percentage of women in leadership, and we must have this and that percentage of women in this field of study or in that field of study, and on and on. Talent and merit matters not, only sex. And skin color, and other such superficial things, but mainly sex, because women matter more than anything else. Women, first and foremost, must be protected from their own choices, but only if they identify as feminist. I remember the Las Vegas shooting of 2017, I believe, which prompted discussions from feminism on toxic masculinity and male violence and all that other stuff which one has come to expect from those who celebrate every single tragedy of this nature for reasons of being able to push their narrative, standing on the corpses of the victims to propagate their political platitudes and say, in voices loud as thunder, that there is something wrong with men. Remember, it is only a mental health issue when women do something wrong. Though of course, considering that masculinity for bullshit reasons is considered a pathology, one could make the claim that discussions on how terrible men are is a discussion on mental health. This assumes, of course, that one agrees with traditional masculinity being presented as a pathology, which one has to suffer the psychopathology of feminism to agree with. I remember reading about one young man, a Jonathan Smith, age 30, who saved about 30 people during the Las Vegas shooting, through his bravery. As a reward for his courage, he got shot in the neck and will, with all likelihood, live with a bullet lodged in his neck for the rest of his life. If that is not enough of a reward for his self-sacrifice, he will also have to live with hearing people blame masculinity, blame men and, by extension, himself, for what happened that night. Sweeping generalizations about men and the wickedness of men are par for the course, part and parcel of living in the end days of Western civilization. Honk, honk. There are no sweeping generalizations about the kindness of men, the capacity men have for self-sacrifice, the protective nature of men, and so forth and so on. People have attempted. Yet, oddly enough, every time someone brings forth the kindness and goodness of men in general, they are attacked for neglecting women, for discriminating against women, for not mentioning the achievements of women. And men are attacked for being violent, being rapists, being this and being that. For one cannot say a single word of good about men. Men are obsolete, remember. There is only one sex, and that sex is female. If anything good is said about men in general, women, whether blatantly feminist or not, will scream victimhood and demand women be included in what is said. For women are victims of someone saying something good about men. Women are victims by not being catered to all the time, by not being celebrated constantly. It is rage-inducing. It strikes me as weird, wacky, self-indulgent and incredibly egotistical. There is no room in our societies to celebrate men. There is only room to celebrate women. There is no room in our societies to harbour empathy for men. All empathy must go to women, all celebration, all everything. Otherwise, the feminist hordes will screech and writhe in agony. For anything positive said about men is like kryptonite to a feminist, a most potent allergen. She will break out in hives and in anxious sweat. She will break out in asthmatic fits of rage and wrath and ruin. Then she will cry and weep and demand that women be celebrated and men be neglected. For men have had it all for all time. And that is true. Men have had all the ridicule, all the shame, all the self-sacrifice, all the debts, all the violence, all the neglect, all the abuse our societies could ever willingly lay on the shoulders of an identity group for decades. And not a damned thing is done about this. For trying to do anything about it further cements, in the minds and eyes and claws and teeth of feminism, the oppression and neglect of women and the so-called constant celebration of men. Even when men are vilified and made to look like some parody of a James Bond villain, over the top and ridiculous. Even when masculinity itself is smeared as something destructive and dark and dangerous, something pathological that must be unlearned and done away with. Men cannot be victims, even when we are victims. For even then, men shall be vilified. For pointing this out means we hate women, that we suffer and struggle from both fragile masculinity and toxic masculinity. And all is wrong with men, and in the world of men there is nothing correct, nothing right, nothing good and proper and true. And this is also true, because feminism has seen to it that nothing shall be good, proper and true in the world of men through refusing men to speak on men's behalf, through refusing the world to celebrate men and masculinity. And that is that for this ramble. It was a good vacation and a very good Christmas. And now I struggle to get back into the habit of writing every day since I allowed myself to be a bit of a lazy bastard for 2 weeks. Oh well. I shall regain my composure and my insane and nimble fingers to wag my tongue at insanity once again. Join me next week, if you please, for more rants, ravings, writings and ramblings. Thank you very much for watching. Here follows an outro most befitting a video of this nature, a blatant attempt at virtual panhandling. Should you wish to support this channel, as well as my blog and any further endeavours this strange path will take me on, there are a few ways you can do that. The easiest would be to like, share and subscribe, as well as clicking the sometimes functional notification bell. Having the message, such as it is, manspread and mansplained far and wide will do wonders. You could also support my rambling and barely contained insanity by buying my books, which are linked below. More books will be made available as time allows. I also have a Redbubble shop, linked below, where you can buy prints in various forms of some of the artwork presented in my videos. Or you can contact me through the contact form on my blog for original artwork, commissions or prints direct from the source, so to speak. Until next time, I am your humble bearded bard, Morea Legier, manspreading majestically beneath the steel sky of doom.